Hello and welcome. I am your host, Eva Jenkins, and I am super excited for you to join me today because I am going to talk about the masks we wear. No, I'm not talking about those charcoal masks or what you wear for your beautiful skin, but I am talking about what might be invisible to others. Well, if you were alive during 2020, you know so much about COVID and how it made us really hide behind doors. And to much surprise, many of us were hiding behind masks. And if you think about it, some of us actually really liked it. Because if you're an introvert like myself, it was definitely a way to stay hidden. We didn't necessarily have to go out and talk, and it gave us the permission in order to do things differently. It was like the hibernation of being able to hide behind masks. And it didn't last very long. Eventually, we had to come out of hiding. And so now, what do we do that we are no longer hiding behind closed doors? Well, if you are like me, you might not like change. And change is exactly what had happened during COVID. It forced all of us to do things differently. And it made us face ourselves with probably what we did not like seeing. It made us confront those hidden things inside of us. And it made me realize I really had to understand what was in my heart and what was going on inside of me internally. And what do I need to do about it in order to be flexible and to move forward in this change? Now that things had happened, we know that it cannot necessarily go back to the way things used to be. So in a way, we have to learn how to adapt with our economic changes. And for many of us, it's very hard in order to understand how to do this. And for me, it was definitely getting outside of my comfort zone. And part of that today is me joining you today in facing my fears of showing myself. And just like I said, it's easy for us to hide behind those masks. And one of the masks that I did not know that I was hiding behind was actually working. You see, I have had a job since I was 11 years old, and working or being busy was something that I was pretty good at. But when things change and it no longer makes a difference as to what it is that you're doing or working, you have to learn how to do things differently. And so what I had to learn to do was to move with the times, to know that working wasn't necessarily a priority. Instead, what was a priority was me being with my family and seeing how I was at being as a wife. Me and my husband, we actually do not have any kids right now, and it's been actually kind of nice, but there are things that we still do individually where we don't necessarily do collectively as a marital couple. And one of them is eating dinner together or cooking. I am not someone who likes to cook or clean, but my husband is, and so he has learned how to pick up those domestic values in our home, and I have had to learn how to do things differently now that that worked for a season but no longer works for today, and now that he's mostly home, he doesn't want to cook all the time. So I have to learn how to change my priorities in order for it to fit my family. You see, sometimes when we get too rigid in our behaviors or our patterns and we become inflexible to change, that is when destruction and dysfunction can happen in the family system. And so when you think about the family, you want to think about, how can I continue to move and be flexible? How can I continue to give myself permission to move forward or do things differently in order to adapt to the change that is happening? You know, I once had heard a demonstration about happiness. And one of the ways to happiness is being able to be flexible with natural disasters. Now, if I was to still force my life to be the way that it used to be before COVID, I am going to hit a dead end because that is unrealistic. I would be living in denial. And so instead, I need to recognize that yes, COVID did happen. Yes, it did force me to do things differently. I can no longer do things that I used to do before. And now I can take the action of learning how to accepting things that I cannot change and be willing to learn how to do things in a new way, especially when we feel that it's been forced upon us. And in that coercion of feeling forced, we have to learn how to yield or submit to the thing that we feel like is forcing us. Otherwise, we are constantly not going to have good attitudes about it. And unfortunately, that is what has happened amongst a lot of people, because no one wanted to accept that it's happened. No one wants to accept that we are now doing life differently. And no one really wants to accept that change is inevitable. But until we learn that we have choices in our life, then we are able to overcome and do things differently. That even though that there are natural disasters, it doesn't mean that it takes choices away from us, because we are still humans, we still have capabilities, we still have a mind, and we can still choose to do things in a different pace, or even choose to submit to what has happened in our world. And when we think about it, that is when the mask starts to come off. Because now we are allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. We're allowing ourselves to no longer protect ourselves in our own fear, but to accept the things that has happened, the things that we might not want to happen, but to know there's nothing we could have done differently in order to have stopped it, because it wasn't by our natural design that we could have done anything. So instead, it's just learning that we still have choices and we can still learn how to be vulnerable and authentic with each other, even in the midst of pain, confusion, and suffering. And so I really would love for us to think about, how are we still hiding behind those masks? And what do we need to do in order to show ourselves a little bit more vulnerability to others? Is this even possible? Can we be vulnerable to others? Are we willing to open ourselves to let others in, to know that we are still fearful in some way? Is there something that we can do differently in order to show ourselves authentically to others? And when we think about these masks that we continue to wear, think about how much more connection we will have with each other when we decide to take these masks off. That we don't have to succumb to hiding and protecting ourselves any longer. Because what that does is create distance between us. And right now, we need each other more than ever. I need you, and I need your support. And if you're someone like me, I am not really someone who asks for help. In fact, it can be scary to reach out and then be rejected or feel abandoned by no one saying, yes, I need it too. But we can no longer stay hidden. We cannot stay protected behind our closed doors any longer. Instead, we must be able to face our fears, put one foot in front of the other, and say we are worth it. And whatever worth you feel like you can overcome, you can do differently, just know you have a sister here with you, a woman that supports you, that encourages you in order to keep going. Just know that you are not alone. Because what happens is that people build up their problems in their mind so much bigger than their solutions. And it's not a good place to be. Since our times are changing, we can do things differently. And it starts with you and me. And so as you think about what it is that you are going to do this week in order to step outside of your comfort zone, in order to show yourself a little bit more to someone else, I want you to remember that you are not alone, that you have everything that you need already inside of you, for it just needs to be shown. So don't give up on yourself, my friends. Instead, encourage yourself daily, because that's what we need. We need to encourage ourselves, remind yourself that you are your best friends. And even if others don't know how to encourage you, even if others don't know the correct words to say to you, remind yourself that you can always say it to you, and that your language to yourself matters. So be a little bit more mindful this week as to how it is that you are speaking to yourself in order to know that you can overcome your life's difficulties. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to encouraging you more on this golden hour.